Harrison Price from the historic Wall Center. We are pleased to be joined by the director of everything at Elite Prospects, Mr. Cam Robinson. We had a marvelous hit with Cam last week, and it does sound like we'll be talking more and more draft as the season goes along. Hello, Cam. How are you?
I'm doing well, boys. Yeah, I'm getting used to my new title of director of everything.
Director of everything.
Good.
Yeah,
it feels good. Yeah.
We're going to talk draft. Maybe not this week because we have matters to deal with the big club. This, I think, this got by a lot of people. But on Saturday night, Hockey Night in Canada, Elliot Friedman had a cryptic remark about teams being curious about staff members with the Florida Panthers after all the winning they've done 2 times.
Pilfering the Cup champs.
Absolutely. Yeah. 2-time reigning defending Stanley Cup champion. There's a Canucks tie-in here, Cam. Please explain.
Yeah, so it might have slipped by a lot of, general fans, but I'll say this, it did not sneak by a lot of people on the team side, because after those comments, I heard from several different people from several different teams being like, that is perhaps a nod to Dale Tallon, who now Tallon's been with the Canucks organization for a little while as a senior advisor and a pro scout. Now, I believe they just added the pro scout to his bio on the team page recently, but when he was hired, that was definitely on the news release as well. But, when Elliot said, I think some teams are curious about people in the Florida staff, the connection was drawn to me that, could that be Dale perhaps positioning himself in a position where it's like, if I become the next president of hockey operations, maybe I can bring some of these guys that were under me when I was in Florida that are still on the Florida staff. Maybe I can bring them over. Now, obviously that's just speculation, but it is interesting to note that, again, I've heard from a couple different people that Tallon has started to ingratiate himself a little bit more day to day with the organization, spending some time with the scouts, maybe leading a little bit, giving some positive reinforcement and praise to some of the players, just being around the staff a little more than he has been in recent years. Now, we know Jim Rutherford still has a year left on his deal after this one, but, turning 77 this year, his son will finish high school this June. I know a lot of people in the industry imagine that this is likely to be his last season. Perhaps he moves on to just an advisor position and steps down from that president of hockey ops. And I think that Dale is absolutely, he's 74, 75 right now too. This is his last chance to really run a club too. So I think he is certainly looking to put himself in a position to have that opportunity. And I think for Francesco Aquilini as well is that to avoid a long drawn out search for a new president of hockey ops and potentially being, spurned by some options that he'd like, that Tallon could be an easy option. He's already in-house. You bring him in. And then the question becomes, how long is Alvin around here as a Rutherford guy? Do you just let the new Poho pick his own GM? So there's a lot of kind of buzz around Dale Tallon and the Canucks and Jim Rutherford in the future, and whether or not this management group has the legs to really do that. We talked about it last week, that those deep cuts to the roster, those really foundational changes, or do you wait until the new set that you're bringing in with that next new long-term plan? Do you allow them to make those changes? So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, from one septuagenarian to another seems a little bit of a weird choice if the Canucks were going to go down that road. Like, why wouldn't you just try to set up a guy that's going to be with you for 10 years, ideally? Mm-hmm. And that's obviously not going to be the case. The other thing I would hope is that the Canucks have the internet and they know what Dale Tallon's track record has been. Last I checked, the Chicago Blackhawks demote Dale Tallon, they win the Stanley Cup. The Florida Panthers fire Dale Tallon, they go on to win the Stanley Cup. It is Tallon departures that usually signal success to come. Man, that would be an interesting choice, wouldn't it, for the Vancouver Canucks?
It would, and I've heard some stories about some of his tenures in both Chicago and Florida, and you're not out to lunch on that one, where he kind of makes the decisions on an island a little bit, regardless of what his analytics or his scouting staff recommend. The hire in Vancouver always felt a little odd to me too, because he was clearly like direct competition or a threat to Rutherford. If you bring in a guy like that, it's like he's just kind of sitting there on the bench waiting. If something goes wrong, he can take it. And that always, that led me to the thought that when Rutherford was in Pittsburgh, there was all sorts of rumors that Tallon was trying to edge his way into that position too, and it got blocked. Now, whether or not this is a scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, like, hey, I took that job, made sure you didn't get that job in Pittsburgh, I'll bring you over here in Vancouver as an advisor, because that's how the old guard works. The old Hockey Boys Club, it's one of the few situations in industry where like an outgoing GM or president of hockey ops offers their suggestion for who should replace them. Like, we never see that, right? If you fire a CEO for not doing their job well, you don't listen to their recommendation because you want to go a different route. But in hockey, that often happens. And what happens sometimes, and we've seen this numerous times in the past, is that someone's losing their job. They recommend someone else, that person gets the job, and now they owe them. Whether they get an advisor tag for life right now, like Bill Torrey got in Florida when Dale was brought in under him, Lou Lamoriello, like we've seen it a number of times, or it's like now they owe me down the line too, right? I got them the next job, and then maybe I can use that. So it's that working relationship has been all over the place, and that's really the only one that kind of explains why Tallon was brought on in the first place into this role.
Yeah, I mean, we should give some credit. He put some of the pieces in place for both of those teams on route to multiple Stanley Cup championships. A couple of other things on this. Pretty much both times that Francesco Aquilini has moved on a general manager, he's had the next guy in place or on the verge of being in place. That was the case when Dave Nonis was let go, and then open up door number 2. Here comes Mike Gillis. That was the case.
Burke before Nonis.
Yeah, that was the case with Trevor Linden when Mike Gillis was shown the door, and that, I should say 3 times, and that was the case when Jim Benning was shown the door, and remember, he was going to conduct a global search, and a few days later he arrived on Jim Rutherford. So there's that. There's also, he doesn't want to hear no from people. Remember Dean Lombardi, and Dean Lombardi didn't want to come to Vancouver. There were NHL executives that didn't want to come to Vancouver. They understood the stakes of working for this ownership group. So a clean, tidy, in place before you move on this management group has been the modus operandi of this ownership group when hiring their chief hockey decision maker.
Yeah, and you're right. You know that he's going to say yes to it, so you don't have to go through the infamy and embarrassment of being refuted by somebody.
And he may even take the job at less than market freight, right, for a NHL executive, because who else is asking Dale Tallon at this stage of his
Do we believe? Life? I mean, obviously, things have not gone well for Jim Rutherford. Cam, do you believe he has the internal pride to say, okay, it's not working for me, I'm going to step out of my contract a year early, or do you think he wants to at least feel like he set the team in the right motion before he steps aside?
I only know Jim a little bit, and he's a competitor. He's a winner. I'm sure he would like to, when he does step down or walk away from this position, to have the team in a spot that they can move forward well, and that he can reflect back on that positively and feel good about it. But at the same time, I do think that age and energy will come into play here. And that it's just the situation that the team is in, is that he obviously doesn't have the staying power to be here through this next 5 years. I don't think that that's unrealistic to say, and so he's not going to be able to steer this team. And don't get me wrong. I completely agree with you. Then you look at the list of people that could potentially step into that role. Right, there's Brendan Shanahan, who is younger. Would Shanahan want to come to Vancouver? That's a valid question that I can't answer. But it's not a long list of potential president of hockey ops, where most teams want to go that route now. They want to have the president of hockey ops, kind of working upwards to the owner, and the GM working downwards, rather than having that GM do both roles now. So unless Vancouver wants to say, like, Alvin, it's your team now, go do it, or whoever the next GM is, it's all on you. I think the team likes having that president of hockey ops, and like he said, it fits with what Aquilini has done in the past, with having someone there, someone he knows, someone he has a relationship with already, that he knows he's going to get a yes and be like, here you go, this is your team.
That is all fair. I'm once again going to direct us to history, though. His last president of hockey operations started uttering the word rebuild he didn't want to rebuild. Suddenly, Trevor Linden was gone. There was no president of hockey operations. It was Francesco and Jim running the show. So I do wonder whether that's a possibility as well if history repeats itself on that score now that Jimmy has uttered the R word, which, as we know, and to me, it's still one of the big questions from what Rutherford had to say last week. Did he say that with ownership's blessing, or is Jim just saying, I'm 76 years old, I've got the authority to make hockey decisions, I'm putting my stake in the ground, and if chips fall and the owner doesn't like it, then
It sounds like the latter. It sounds
I'm
like the latter.
77, I don't need this anymore.
Well, and it was so contrary from what he said, what was it, 2 weeks earlier, where he said, we're not going to
Not even
look,
like
right?
10 days,
Less
11
10
days, or
right?
13 days max. Yeah.
Something happened between that time span, and it wasn't just a couple of losses on the scoreboard, right? So you imagine maybe he did get the green light. But the other thing I think about when I look at Dale Tallon at his age, and we were just saying, it's like, Rutherford's not going to be here to rebuild this team. It's not long. Well, neither's Tallon, but maybe Tallon's doing the same thing that Benning and Weisbrod sold Aquilini on when they canned Linden, is that, no, we don't need to rebuild. No, we can turn this around quickly. Even if we trade Quinn Hughes, well, let's trade him for win now pieces. Maybe that's going to be the sell job, is that, I'm 75, but I don't need 5 years. I can turn this team around in 2 or 3. Again, just speculation, but you have to kind of line these things up and how it would make sense.
Let's ask you our poll question today, Cam. Are you resigned to a Quinn Hughes trade?
Yeah, I am. I think obviously nothing is 100% in this world, and I'm not sitting next to Quinn and hearing him talk about his future, but I think that the writing is very much on the wall on where this is going to end up, and I have mentally prepared myself for that. And I think most people probably have too. And then you hope that if he does decide to stay, it's because a massive contract is slid in front of him. And he's like, you know what? I'm a captain of a Canadian team. I'm going to be the richest player, making the most in NHL history here per year. I'll stick around. But I think the wisest thing for this team at this point, it's tough to give up a player like that. But if you got to do it sooner rather than later. You move Quinn Hughes this year, automatically you get a bigger return. But the sidebar of that is your team is much, much worse, and you get a lottery pick, and they need as many top 5 picks as possible in order to get the dynamic, high-level talent to actually build something long-term.
And we're starting to see way more out-of-market media talking about this, which, it's not the sole driver of interest for other NHL clubs, but I do wonder, guys, if this does reach a fevered pitch, the clamoring for a Quinn Hughes trade from outside the market's one thing, inside the market. But when the rest of the league starts to talk about this, I wonder how many GMs get caught up on that wave and come with a big offer.
This will be the single biggest opportunity that I can think of in terms of
a trophy winner in his prime,
a Norris
right?
trophy winner in his prime. Yeah, I mean, it is a very small number of trades that could compete at this level in terms of a better principle.
Yeah.
The Weber-Subban trade was 1-for-1, right? The Taylor Hall, Adam Larson trade, that fateful day all those years ago. But yeah, you're looking at a small number of trades of this order. And so, yes, NHL teams.
Even an Eric Carlson trades, an aged Eric Carlson at that point.
Thornton.
And especially because, now most people have cap space, right? You're not dealing with a limited market that you have been when superstars have been available in a tighter cap world.
And Quinn doesn't make that much money. He doesn't make $15 million, right?
That's right. I mean, he's a great deal. Let me just run a few names by you here because I keep seeing them popping up. So let's play out the Carolina thing. Nikishin and Bradley Nadeau as principals. And I suspect there would be other things involved, but tell us about the Russian defenseman Nikishin, who dropped into their playoff lineup last year, and the former BCHLer Bradley Nadeau.
It'd certainly get my attention if that was a starting offer. is Nikishin. He played several extra years in the KHL over there. One KHL Defenseman of the Year. He's big. He is physical. He's mobile. He's not one of these guys that's going to put up 50, 60 points, I don't imagine. But he has the ability to be like a good number one on a team. He has a lot of those characteristics. And as we see as a rookie this year, as an older rookie, he's handling 20 plus minutes a night very, very well. Nadeau is a shooter. He is walk downhill on the power play, let it fly, goal scorer through and through. Not the biggest player, not like overly dynamic, but he's going to be a good top six scorer for that team. They've got a lot of pieces. They got Jackson Blake, they got Logan Stankoven, and they've got all sorts of pieces that they could dangle around. And they've got picks too. They've got Dallas's picks. So Carolina is definitely going to be involved in everything. And that they would love someone like Quinn Hughes. That's kind of the missing piece on that team, other than maybe like a rock star goaltender. They need someone who can really generate points from the blue line. So yes, I think that if he was made available, Carolina would be knocking.
Nadeau is a 19-year-old, scored 32 goals in 64 games last year in the AHL. Is that 19-year-old?
He was the best rookie in the AHL last year, Cam. Is that fair to say? Nadeau?
It absolutely, yeah, for sure. Yeah. And that was even with taking a little, a shortcut down to Ottawa for the World Juniors, where he was mishandled, where they put him on the goal line on the power play, where it's like,
they were all mishandled last year under that coach. The whole tournament was mishandled last year.
Don't get him started.
And now do me Detroit, where of course Quinn has some history in the Detroit, Michigan area as well. Edvinsson, and then the two young centers there are Casper and Danielson. I know they've got young wingers too that might be attractive, but do me the centers, Casper, Danielson, and the big defenseman Edvinsson.
Yeah, I mean Edvinsson, he's big, he's very toolsy, he can skate. I've started to have these discussions with some scouts too. Is that I wonder if you need to have great hockey IQ when you're a big defenseman who can skate and has tools. Because I was a little bit lower on Edvinsson, but I think he's going to break just right. Guys like Sam Dickinson, some of these guys just prove they don't need to be smart. So he's not a big thinker out there. I think he's more of a complementary piece on a top pair than like a true number one. Like give me Nikishin over him. And then the centers, probably they're fine. Marco Casper, Nate Danielson, Michael Brenzig, Nygaard, like they're all kind of the same player, just wrapped in a different cover. And I kind of envision them as more like top 9 guys, like maybe not play drivers, not really stir the drink, but maybe shut down a little bit and play some PK. So I think you could probably do better. And I'll throw one at you that an exec sent to me, just not from Columbus, I should say, but he said, would Kent Johnson and Denton Mateychuk and a couple firsts, do you think that would intrigue Vancouver?
So
and again, Go ahead. Yeah, I was just going to say is that, Kent Johnson put up, just shy of a point a game last year, but he's been, ice cold this year. And then I've been very, very high on Denton Mateychuk as like a power play one quarterback, offensive defenseman. He's already got, 6 or 7 goals this year, not playing on the top power play unit. So he's got a lot of juice, but it's like now we're starting to look at, the younger center with big upside, but maybe is struggling. And then the younger defenseman with a ton of upside who's already starting to step into the league. And then a couple firsts. It's like these are the type of packages that teams around the league are talking about anyways for Vancouver.
So Mateychuk, for those who don't know, Western Hockey Leaguer,
11th overall, I think.
12th overall in 2022, 5'11", 190 pounds. He's already 23 points in 70 NHL games split over 2 years. And as Cam mentions, it's not like there's a ton of opportunity. He was nearly a point per game in his brief AHL cameo. And I'm starting to think this is a kid who's never going to see the AHL again.
No.
But to me, that trade pivots on Kent Johnson, Port Moody's Kent Johnson, Cam, because he looked like he was ready to break his rookie year, and then there was a step back, and then he really looked like he was ready to break last year, and now there's been another step back.
Up and down, yeah.
What accounts for that, and long-term, could he play center ice? I think that's where that trade has to pivot for the Canucks.
He can't be around a winger. He has to be a center.
Questions, right?
No, and that's literally been the question around KJ since playing at Michigan, like where he was, he was like a top pick, top 5 pick, and supreme hands and so slippery and smooth. But it's like every time I watched him, like, is this guy really going to play the middle of the ice? Like he has the playmaking, he has the handles for it, but he doesn't really have that grit and that drive that you often need, even for a playmaking center. You often have to get into it a little bit, and he struggled too. So that I don't think he would be a long-term solution as a number one center.
maybe a good number 2 center behind someone, but is Elias Pettersson the guy that you want those two stacked down the middle? You wouldn't have much meat there.
He doesn't have JT Miller's grit. Is that the issue? Like, I was going to make the comparison that nobody was convinced that JT Miller was a center until he was 25 either. So
I'm not sure.
Yeah, JT just wouldn't skate, right?
Yeah.
JT just wouldn't skate back then, but he always had the jam. He just would float around a little bit.
Yeah.
Nobody got grit like JT, Blake. You should know that.
Mm-hmm.
Marvelous stuff, Cam. Thank you for this. Playing to think about and playing to talk about going forward. Appreciate this. Till next Wednesday or next Tuesday.
Cheers, boys. Talk soon.